This is the Authority Company Podcast, conversations with leaders who are building the future. Hola, I'm Joe Pardavila, and today I am joined by Dr. Gary Zammit, an award-winning entrepreneur, neuroscientist, and author of Beyond the Science: How People, Process, and Systems Transform the Business of Life Sciences. Our chat explores leadership, resilience, building A-player teams, the emotional cost of entrepreneurship, and why the future of medicine depends as much on people and culture as it does science and technology. Gary Zammit, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm fine. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome, Gary. And so I want to start with sort of like an oddball question, if you don't mind, Gary, and if you can indulge me. Growing up, I was an 80s kid, so the bad guy was always like Russians, Russian terrorists, or like bad people that were pretty obvious. Now here in the 2000s, I don't know what's happened, but now like rich people and the pharmaceutical industry, that's what's considered bad. And you've been doing this for such a long time. What has it been like working in this realm? I can't wait to get into your work and everything you've done. But I'm just curious and to get like a sort of level set what it's like in your industry now, where there is like, if you hear the word pharmaceutical, people have like crook their eye a little bit. What's going on there? Tell me about this evolution you've seen during the course of your career.
I think it is fair to say that the pharmaceutical industry has had its history of bad press over certain incidents that have resulted in increased regulatory scrutiny, demands for quality and compliance. And in some ways, the pharmaceutical industry has been tagged with a reputation that is about as bad as the tobacco industry in some cases and at some times. But I can tell you, after working in this industry for over 26 years, I have never met uh, an industry or a group of people working in an industry who are more dedicated and more focused to improving the lives of patients far and wide than those in the pharmaceutical industry. There really is an altruistic drive and a well-intentioned drive to bring better, newer, more effective, and safer medicines to people who really need them.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that with me, Gary. Because I wanted to start with that because it's sort of like addressing the elephant in the room of just like, hey, listen, you're talking to a pharmaceutical person, not bringing up sort of like the dark side of it. And in the book, you go very much into the dark side of your life. And so my first question, because you go to some places here, Gary, that many people are afraid to go to. How many people knew your story before you put all of this in the book? Out of genuine curiosity, because like I said, if people read this book, and I want to touch upon some of those elements today, but like, how many people knew what you were going through before this book is going to reach the masses?
Really not that many. People in my family knew what I was going through. Certainly my wife and
Right.
and my kids knew what my experience was working in the industry. But I found it really interesting after the book came out and several people who were working at the company, even back in the day when we were facing financial challenges 13, 15 years ago, they called me and said, I had no idea that you were going through that personally or that our company was going through that. You just uh, persisted and pursued the company mission without skipping a beat. So they were surprised to hear that all that was going on.
Any trepidation in sharing that? I mean, obviously, it's the driver of your story, but was there something where you're like, or maybe even your wife stepped in? Because I know when I wrote my book, my wife read it multiple times, and she was like my number one editor. But like, were there moments in where your wife was like, "Maybe don't mention that part in there, Gary. What are you, what are you doing that?" Or maybe you had that feeling to do.
No, I've kind of felt, and I think she felt that our lives were an open book. And to the extent that the experience that I went through or that we went through might help other people, entrepreneurs in the field, other people trying to form teams and establish great organizations, to the extent that that could be instructive or informative for them, we thought we can just lay it all out there.
Excellent. And you sort of minimize things by saying you went through some financial struggles. It was beyond financial struggles. You almost lost a company, your savings. You thought your family would be better off without you. What does a moment like that do to a person psychologically? What kind of like, I know a lot of people throw the word trauma around kind of willy-nilly these days, but what kind of trauma does that build within you? Obviously, you've gone it through the other side, But how do you think that changed you to the person you are today, Garrett?
Well, it going through a financially difficult time, and just to recap, we went through a difficult time during the Great Recession, and this was a time when many pharmaceutical companies were abandoning the field of central nervous system research. They were getting out of psychiatry, they were getting out of neurology, and many of them talked about why the clinical trials in the CNS therapeutic area fail more often than those in other therapeutic areas. They're more complicated, they're more expensive, and very, very challenging to do. So a lot of the big pharmaceutical companies were getting out of that space, and at the same time, the whole world was going through this recession. So the funding for new projects, or even to follow through on existing or planned projects, kind of dried up for a while, and we had to find ways to keep the company open, make the company survive. And I can tell you, it was a very stressful time. I was watching our financials literally every day, um, and sometimes very concerned about whether we would make payroll at the next payroll and so on. But aside from the stress, it builds up a great resilience. If you really think about who you want leading the next wave of development, perhaps in any industry, you don't want those people who have had an easy ride all the way along the way. You want the people who have experienced the ups and downs, and seen the challenges, experienced some of the pitfalls, and learned how to get around them, learn how to get through, and learn how to persist. So it built up an incredible sense of resilience in me, and a determination to pursue our mission and vision.
And, your aforementioned wife, I mean, a lot of people use the phrase, "We were all looking for our ride and die." And clearly, your wife is your ride and die because you share a brutally honest story where you said to her, "Hey, we should probably get a divorce so we could protect the family." Looking back now, what did that moment reveal about the woman that was in your life? Because I'm sure, there was, obviously before that, there were some good and bad days, but what is that kind of person who's there, who sticks through the really, really bad times say about your relationship? And really, without that, who knows where you would be?
Absolutely. I don't think that I'd be the person I am today, and certainly I don't think we'd have the company that we have today without the tremendous support that I've had from my wife, but not only my wife, but from my family. Really, people who really cared and who believed in me and believed in the mission of the company, even in the darkest hours. And when I was so concerned that the company wouldn't survive, I approached my wife and I said, honey, I think you should divorce me, put the house in your name, take our money, and protect yourself because I don't know what I'm going to go through. And so these were choices I made in my life, in my business, and I should have to deal with the consequences, not you. Um, Now, in retrospect, I don't know that legally that would have made much of a difference. The
Good
creditors,
point.
the creditors would have still come, but but at least at that point, I was thinking worst case scenario, what could we do? But without skipping a beat, in a reflex, my wife said, "There's no way. We're a team. There's no way that we're not going to deal with this as a couple," and we did.
That's good stuff. You talked about earlier how a lot of people in your company didn't know the struggles that you were going through, but but people did though, right? People understood. Like people were not like, oh, this was not so opaque where you could hide that the company was struggle. What was the culture vibe at its lowest point when behind the scenes you're scrambling to keep the lights on, but people are kind of like, again, some didn't notice it, but, like, I think many probably were not oblivious to the fact that, "Oh, wait a minute. We're not making as much money as we did yesterday." So, what was the morale like at the time?
Right. Well, definitely challenging because uh, before the recession, we had scaled up to meet the demands of so many projects that were promised to us, awarded to us, projects that were ongoing, and projects that ultimately just never materialized or never went forward. So we had really scaled up in advance of providing all of these services. And as we were facing the financial challenges, we had to have a reduction in our workforce. So we had to lay people off. We had to take some people from full-time employment to part-time employment. And when people go through an experience like that, um, some some will stick with it and remain enthusiastic about what's going on. They'll face the challenge, but others uh, get worried. Understandably so, they get worried and they start looking for other jobs. Some may leave, so it could be uh, really challenging to the morale of an organization. But I think again, it all depends on how the company and its managers approach these situations and about how people come together as a team. It's one of the things I talk about in the book um, is that challenging situations kind of inoculate us to the stress. The more you deal with them, the better you deal with them, the more prepared you are to deal with anything that comes forward in the future.
Let's talk a little bit about the niche of within which your pharmaceutical company works in neuropsychiatric drug development. Can you put that for many people watching or listening may know what that means, but for a dummy like myself, Gary, what exactly are you developing there?
Basically, what it means is that we work in the space of the central nervous system. So the medicines that we work with are primarily the medicines that get into the brain and that have an impact on people with psychiatric disorders like depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, post traumatic stress, sleep disorders, and things like that. Or on the neurological side, things like Alzheimer's disease, epilepsy, movement disorders like Parkinson's disease, and so on. That's really our niche area. There are many other therapeutic areas in the pharmaceutical world in oncology for treating cancer, dermatology, treating skin disorders, um, endocrinology and metabolism, treating diabetes and weight gain, and so many others. But we've stayed focused in the niche in our area of core competency in the niche of CNS.
Okay, so explain this to me, Gary, because it almost seems like the math doesn't math. Because you describing what you guys do to a lay person again sounds pretty recession proof. Where in God's green earth does someone say, "Hey, we don't need this stuff. Let's not invest in this." Can you give us a little context as to why that would happen? Because some people may say like, "Oh yeah, everyone went through hell during the Great Recession." I've spoken to people in the automotive industry, people in real estate, but what you're explaining to me sounds like something that should not be affected by financial parameters. Can you again? Sorry for let's dumbing down everything, but why did that happen to you guys over there at Clinilabs?
Well, I think it happened, throughout our industry, and not only our industry. It was happening worldwide. But as say pharmaceutical companies that hire us to do their clinical development work, as they're facing financial challenges, they have to make decisions about where they're going to get their greatest return on investment, how they can financially stabilize their own organizations. And as I said earlier, the field of central nervous system research is a bit riskier than others because we have higher failure rates in our clinical trials than other therapeutic areas. They're more challenging to do because we have softer endpoints. So for example, we're not measuring the size of a tumor to see if we shrunk a tumor. We actually have to talk to people and do an
Right.
assessment to see how depressed they feel or how anxious they feel. So they're softer endpoints. They're harder to manage in clinical trials, and because of all these complexities, the trials tend to be more expensive. So, so the sponsor companies, the pharmaceutical companies, they may have looked at things at that point and said, well, right now these are riskier areas, and we're going to not invest in those areas right now. We'll postpone and we'll invest in other areas that might produce a, a quicker or more reliable return on our investment.
Got it. All right, cool. All right. So without spoiling too much of the book, obviously you've come through on the other side, or you would not have written this book. You wouldn't have you wouldn't have been able to write this book. And we want people to read more about the story in it. But just tell us, how did it turn around? Was it just riding out the storm, getting through that rough patch post recession? What did you do? What happened so that now you're speaking to me today here in 2026?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great question. I think that, we really had to sit back and take stock of who we were as an organization and understand what would enable us to survive, but not just survive, what would enable us to thrive and become a great organization, a great company. And one of the main things that I realized at that time during the recession was that it wasn't just about the scientific work. We often tend to think of the scientific protocols, the clinical trial methods and protocols that we use as being the standard for success or failure. If we follow the protocol the right way, then then of course we'll succeed. We'll get great information. But I realized back then it wasn't just about the scientific protocol. What was equally as important, and perhaps even more important, was the people behind the protocol, the people who were actually doing the work, finding the right people, the people with the right education, experience, and skill set, the people with the right sense of community and willingness to collaborate as team members, the people who were willing to take on processes and kind of have them ingrained as part of their own day-to-day work. And turning the focus of the company on bringing in those people, refining those processes, and then using technology accelerators to supercharge the whole thing, that's what made all the difference in the world for us.
Excellent. And you write a lot about A players and retaining A players. But how do you do that when everything's, pardon my French, a shit show? Like, A players are in demand, as you know, Gary. So they may feel allegiance to you, but be like, hey, listen, I need to get off of this sinking ship and find. So tell me about retaining A players when things are not going well. Because I think every boss on the planet wants a full team of A players, but sometimes the culture dictates if you're able to maintain those A players. So how did you do that?
One of the key words you just mentioned is culture. I'll come back to culture momentarily, but um, one of the things that I've discovered about A players is that they're truly passionate about their work. They really have a vision for what they want to achieve personally, and uh, and a vision for the organizations that they're in and what they want to achieve. People kind of come in different at different levels. There are some people that um, are employed because they do a job. Um, Other people turn those jobs into careers. Other people pursue a profession. But but A players are really operating because they have a calling. There's something inside of them that really drives them, and and back then during those difficult times, and even still today, when I was trying to find people to join the team and come onto the team and stay on the team, I was looking 50% for people who had the education, experience, and skill set, but the other 50% was looking for that passion. And that's what draws A players into an organization, even during challenging times. Sometimes um, the, the challenges excite them and they can't wait to jump in because they want to make a contribution. But it's really looking for people with that passion that makes all the difference in the world.
I've never asked someone this because the A player vernacular is used a bunch in culture, but like, can you make an A player? Like, you know how they say like, great speakers are born, they're not created, blah blah. Can you create or develop someone to become an A player, or is it sort of something that they got it or they don't?
I would say, and this is just my opinion and based on my experience, I would say for the most part, um, people are who they are. People are A players or they are not. However, um, I will also say that there are people who are not A players. They might be a B player or a C player, but um, but you can work with them and unlock that A player in them. And what I found is that really, really good A players unlock the talents of the B and C players to become a team of A players. So the A players will either help a person work their way up, or the A players will help them work their way out. So so you can really unlock that, and I think it's kind of exciting and very fulfilling to watch as teams become cohesive and form around excellence and performance. It's really kind of exciting to see it happen right before your eyes.
Yeah, to use a sports metaphor, the way you describe it, I'm immediately thinking about like a point guard in basketball who can elevate the players around, and that's essentially what you're looking for is the Magic Johnson, the Steph Curry, the person who can make everyone around them better. But sometimes, this you would know this, but sometimes A players are not team players. Like they're really good at what they do and maybe have trouble with some of the soft skills. Does how do or maybe that doesn't happen. Tell me about that because I can only imagine there could be some extreme A players that are really good working on their own, but when collaboration or teamwork is involved, they're like, yeah, no, don't worry, I got this. They're to use another basketball reference, they're ball hogs. They don't want to share the basketball with everybody else. Does that happen?
Yeah, I would probably make the case that that's not a true A player. That, you know,
Okay.
that's a superstar,
Mm,
and maybe there are superstars that are out there, and organizations have you know have great benefit from having superstars there. In my view, the A player is the one who is communicative, collaborative, and kind of puts their own individual needs aside for the higher purpose of the team and the organization and the mission.
nice. All right, so you've got three legs to your stool. First one was people. We just covered that. Let's get into process. What is the single most important thing about creating a world class process?
The single most important thing to developing a world-class process is defining the process, reducing it down to those elements that just about anybody can follow. And then the next most important thing is making sure that people are trained on that process. So that there's a combination of people and process that really have to come together. You can have the greatest process in the world, but if people don't know how to follow it, or they don't follow it, you don't get any benefit from it. So it's really having a very defined set of steps, but also teaching and encouraging people to follow through right on that process.
Excellent. And then the final and third leg of that stool is the systems or slash technology. Um, Tell us about the impact of technology on clinical trials. Obviously, you need the people, the A players, you need to have the process in place. But almost at the end of the day, that's why they call it three-legged stool. You need all three of them to prop each other up. Tell me about the importance and the impact of technology.
Yeah, yeah. So technology and technology accelerators are huge in the clinical trials industry, just as it is in virtually every other industry. Um, in very simplistic terms, if you were to think back, 30 or 40 years ago, um, when people were manually recording numbers on a paper spreadsheet and then using a calculator to add up those numbers. You might have a room full of actuarials or accountants doing that work. Now, nobody would ever think of that. Now, everybody is going to enter numbers into Excel, and with a keystroke, they're going to be able to collect all the information that they need off of those columns of numbers. So, and in clinical trials, very much the same. We now have electronic forms of documentation. We can um, collect patient responses to questionnaires or to surveys that we provide electronically. All of the electronic data go into a database that can then be easily interrogated. We have now ways of measuring people with devices like wearables, so that if we want to measure blood pressure or um, or activity or movement. We can do that now easily. All the data are digitized. They come through. They can be analyzed very quickly. There are so many applications now that really help to streamline the process that we use in clinical trials, and once those technologies reach a tipping point, they become accepted in the industry. You would never dream of going back.
Nice. And so we're talking about the technology part. I can't let you go without talking about those 2 dreaded letters, so you know what's coming, artificial intelligence, AI. And as you know, the people that are building AI have touted grand ideas with it, and one of those grand ideas is cures and curing diseases. Are you bullish? I would assume you're bullish, but, like, how bullish are you in terms of, like, the impact that within our lifetime, we will see AI find cures for things? And I understand that you're more into the central nervous system kinda stuff, but, like, they're talking about cancer and all that other stuff. What do you think? Do you think AI is the next lever to sort of turn the pharmaceutical industry, like, almost like hit the boost button and take it to the next level?
I think it'll have tremendous impact, and I think we're already beginning to see it. So AI can look at large sets of information. For example, can go out and interrogate all of the peer-reviewed literature to look for evidence of drug mechanisms that might lead to the identification of new molecules that could be tested to treat or cure a particular illness. The 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 level and depth of interrogation is so great that it's not anything that a human being or even a team of human beings could reasonably do. Now we can do that in a matter of hours, to interrogate a data set like that. We can also take the information that we've learned from many clinical trials that have worked and those that haven't worked, and use that information to design new clinical trial protocols for the next studies that will be done, so that those studies might be done more successfully or done faster. We're even seeing evidence now where AI is being used to create what we call a digital twin, so that a person ends up with essentially a digital duplicate of themselves, and that duplicate might then be used to demonstrate what a response might be to no treatment versus what the person would actually get getting an active treatment for any particular condition. And you can really accelerate the conduct of a clinical trial by doing something like that, and then inform what's going to happen on the next trial. So AI, we're just scratching the surface right now on AI, but we're already seeing how it's impacting the efficiency of drug and medical device development.
What's the current state of R&D, as we start to wrap things up? Because I think we're all vaguely familiar with that. You know, when someone comes up with a drug, it's not like if someone comes up with the next day, it's on a store shelf. There's a lot involved there. Tell me what it's like now, because I know there have been sort of negotiations and changes in terms of, like, how quickly products can go to market. What Give us the current state here in 2026.
Um, Well, I think there's a lot of optimism in R&D. And as you say, we're going through a lot of changes. For example, the FDA just recently announced that instead of requiring 2 studies to show effectiveness or efficacy and safety of a drug, in some cases, they're only going to require that 1 study be done. And that means that new therapeutics might make their way to the market faster than they would have in the past. It also means that when pharmaceutical companies that are trying to examine how they use their resources, if they can save money by doing 1 really good study instead of having to do 2 on a particular drug, they might take that money and then put it into the development of a second drug or a third drug. So we will not only see speed, but we might see a greater volume of new therapeutics coming forward and new approvals.
Excellent. All right, so Gary, in closing, if someone's listening or watching right now, feeling burned out, overwhelmed, close to giving up like you did, what would you tell them after everything you've lived through?
Well, I would say persistence is essential for success. And even when things appear to be very challenging, keep going. I love to read biographies and biographies of scientists and entrepreneurs. And I read so many biographies of people like Thomas Edison, Colonel Sanders, and Henry Ford, and so many others who faced challenges along the way. But even when things seemed very dark, they persisted and they became great at what they did. Don't be intimidated by challenges. Embrace them, learn from them, and push through.
Is Gary Zammit. Beyond the Science, How People, Process, and Systems Transform the Business of Life Sciences. Gary, thanks so much for the time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Joe. It's a pleasure.
And that's going to do it for this episode. If you want to find out more information about Gary and our other amazing authors, go to theauthoritycompany.com.